This is the Inkee Falcon Plus gimbal, a gimbal specifically designed for the GoPro Hero cameras. So if you're new to this gimbal and you're wondering what the gimbal modes are and the differences between them, then this video is for you. Okay, so I'm going to go through all the main gimbal modes of the Inkee Falcon Plus gimbal. Okay, let's start off with the first mode, which is the pan follow mode. So when you switch on the gimbal, the very first light will be in the PF mode. So the pan follow mode, as the name suggests, will allow the gimbal to follow in the pan direction. So if you turn the gimbal to the left or to the right, so basically horizontally, notice that the camera is going to be following that action. So it's going to follow whichever way you are facing the gimbal. Now if you try and alternatively tilt the gimbal, so for example if you push to look upwards or you try and look downwards, notice that the camera is now not going to actually follow that actual action. So it's going to remain level. It's not going to tilt up or tilt down. So that is the tilt axis locked. Now the third axis is the rotation axis. So if you try and move the gimbal like this and you're trying to kind of tilt the gimbal, twist the camera, this axis is going to be locked, and that's the rotation axis. So the only axis that is actually following is the pan axis, as you can see here, and that is why it's called the pan follow mode. Okay, so let's now press the button and go on to the next mode, which is the HL mode, or the horizontal locked mode. So if you now try and move your gimbal to the left or right, notice that we can actually follow that axis, so the pan axis is still unlocked. If we now try and tilt the gimbal up or down and point the camera to the ceiling, for example, or the floor, then the camera is going to follow that action. The only axis that's locked is the rotation axis. So if I try and move like this, then the camera is actually going to remain level. So in the horizontal locked, or the HL mode, the only axis that's locked is the rotation axis, but the other two axes, the tilt and the pan axis, is unlocked. So this is a little bit more forgiving compared to the pan follow mode. Okay, so the HL mode is perhaps the best mode, I think, for 90% of the situations. The reason is that because both the pan and the tilt locks axis are unlocked. So for example, if you're doing a walking tour or something like that, or perhaps you're tracking a human, or you're tracking a dog, or anything like that, or a car, then this mode is going to be perfectly fine for being able to kind of follow that action. So I would say 90 to 95% of the situations you find yourself in, then I would suggest the HL mode is your friend. Whereas the pan follow mode only has one axis unlocked. So if you're doing, for example, you want to film like maybe a beach and you want to keep the horizon level, then you'll want to make sure you're on the PF mode, because that keeps the if you try and tilt it, it keeps the tilt axis locked, which means you're going to basically keep the horizon nice and level. Alright, so let's now move on to the third mode by pressing the M button, and that is the FPV mode, or the first person mode. Now that basically unlocks all the axes. So if I turn left and turn right, that one is unlocked. If I tilt up or tilt down, then that is unlocked. And if I now try and kind of rotating it, then basically the world's my oyster. I can do whatever I like. There's complete freedom. So this, I would say, is if you're particularly into kind of basically running around like a lunatic with your gimbal, you're following all sorts of action, or you're trying to emulate maybe a drone or anything like that, then the FPV mode is your friend for this. But for all other situations, I would stick to the other two modes. Okay, so now I want to tell you about the very next mode, which is very easy to access, and that is the gimbal locked mode. Now the way to access this is whichever mode you're in currently, it doesn't really matter, and you press and hold the trigger at the back of the gimbal. You'll notice while you're holding it that 4 lights are illuminated, 4 blue lights, and that means you are in the gimbal locked mode. Now what that means is that, as the name suggests, all the axes are locked. So if I try and pan left or right, notice the camera is looking in one direction and it's not going to respond to my panning motions. If I tilt up and down, it's also going to stay looking in that direction, and if I try and tilt it or like rotate it like this, it's also going to remain locked. So really, it doesn't matter what I do with the gimbal, The GoPro is going to carry on looking in the direction it is when I press the trigger. If I then let go of the trigger, it will then respond in whatever mode is currently illuminated, whether it's the PF mode or the HL mode, for example. So if I press, for example, go to the next mode and say I'm on the HL mode, and then I can engage the lock, so I can press and hold the trigger in. I can then quickly access the gimbal lock mode, and then if I let go of the button, I'm then back into the HL mode. So this trigger is available on all of the modes, the PF, the HL and the FPV mode. So this is a special mode. For example, you don't want the gimbal to respond at all. Perhaps you're locking onto, you're doing a push forward shot and you're locking onto, say, a person, or you're locking onto a particular object, and you don't want the gimbal to wander off. Then that's a very quick trick, is just to press and hold the trigger, and you can then film. You can kind of move around a little bit, and the camera is going to carry on being locked onto the object that you are currently filming. Okay, let's now talk about the next special mode, which is the torch mode. And the way to access this is just simply pick a mode, for example, like the PF mode, and then you want to just bring up the gimbal to a horizontal position, very slowly like this, until everything is nice and horizontal. And then you are now in the torch mode. So I can kind of use it, the film just like this, and I can carry on doing what I want to do. Now, why might you want to use this? Well, this is useful, for example, if you want to film very low down on the ground, perhaps look up at an object, and you want to kind of save your knees from bending down. Then you don't want to have to keep the gimbal upright. You can quickly hold it in a horizontal position. That's going to be so much easier for you. Now, while you're in this mode, you can then access the next mode, which is the vertical shooting mode. The way to do that is if you are currently in the PF mode, you can then double click on the M button, and as soon as you do that, you notice it now rotates in a sort of vertical position like this, and now I can kind of film kind of TikTok style or anything like that. If anything that requires the vertical filming, then this guy is perfect for doing that, and you can pretty much use the gimbal just like this. While we're also here, we can of course use the trigger as well. So if I press and hold the trigger in, the 4 lights are going to illuminate, and now notice that the camera is locked on a particular viewpoint where I press the trigger, but it's not responding to anything I do on the gimbal, so it's going to carry on looking in that direction. So it's very similar to what we did in the other mode, the more horizontal mode, but this also allows you to use the locked mode in the vertical orientation as well. And I can just simply let go of the trigger, and I can just sort of carry on using it in a vertical position. Okay, so while we're in this mode, we notice that the light on the far right is flashing, so it means we are in a special vertical mode. Now, to get out of this mode, what we need to do is press the M button once, and then it's going to go back to the previous mode that we were currently in, whichever one it was, and I was in the PF mode. Okay, so that's the torch mode. We've also covered the special vertical mode, and the last mode that I want to show you is the spin shot mode. Okay, so the next mode we can also do while we're in the horizontal mode, and that is the spin shot mode. Again, a very special mode. So what we need to do first of all is we need to enter into the vertical mode. Just like I said before, we need to double click on the M button. The light should start flashing on the right, and then we need to double click it again. So while the light's flashing, double click it again. It's then going to kind of slightly move, but you'll notice the light on the far right is now a solid blue light, which means you're now in spin shot mode. What this means is we can now use the joystick, and if we move it to the right or to the left, notice that the camera now starts spinning. So we are now in sort of spin shot mode. So again, this is very useful for example, you want to do a special effects, you want to walk down, I don't know, maybe a corridor, forwards or backwards, and you kind of want to spin around, or maybe you want to look up at a canopy of some trees, and you want to get the shots of the nice blossom or the canopy. That's perfect for doing a spin shot mode. You can simply point your gimbal and then just point up, and you're going to get a nice shot with the spin shot mode. So once again, you can kind of do like a 360-degree spin with this guy. I'm just going to do just this bit here, and you only actually have one speed as well, so you can't go flying around. You're just going to go at the speed of which this gimbal's got, which is quite slow. Anyway, so that is the spin shot mode. And once again, to exit it, we're just going to double click the button again, and it's going to go back to the the vertical mode, and then we press it once and we should go woo, and we should do a bit of a magic trick there, and we should go back to the vertical mode, not vertical, we should go back to the horizontal orientation that we have been using right at the beginning. So there you guys, that is the gimbal modes of the Inkee Falcon Plus. Hope it's useful. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and of course hopefully you can enjoy using this gimbal with your GoPro. I'm going to probably quite soon do a kind of setup video to help you guys work out if you're quite new to the gimbal and you're trying to figure out how exactly to set it up with your GoPro, how to balance it, and how to sort of control it, then that video should be coming up at some point on my channel, so make sure you're subscribed. Other than that, take care, and I shall see you soon on another video.